Hello, welcome to story time. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. That's rather late, isn't it? Suppose I shall get the music started for this. Hmm, probably a good idea. I need to find the correct music first. I think I have this here. Yes, here it is. Russian waltzes. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All right, let us get it going. Oh, come on, music. Don't do that to me. There we are. Still. What? Oh, it's just low is all. There we go. Now you can hear it just fine, I'm sure. And I'm sure you can probably hear me as well. Yes? Let me turn this. There we go. All right. I think that's good. Turn this down a little bit. Wonderful. Well, anyway, hello. Welcome to story time. It's 1 in the morning. It's fairly late. I should be getting to bed soon so that I can, go to work in the morning. My watch is dying. I'll need to put it on the charger overnight. It happens. Anyway, let's get through these quickly. Facebook, Brett Picorni, and Storytime. 2 words, exclamation point at the end. That's what I give most of my updates. Or at least what I say I do. YouTube, Pete Picorni 1. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and of course comment so that I can give you huzzahs and shout-outs. And finally, Twitch, Brett Doesn't Game, all one word. Now, shall we? We're going to read some Russian fairy tales tonight. How many? Who can tell? Hello, Mum. Huzzah! Thank you for joining. Like I said, who can tell? Oh, itchy nose. Sorry. Don't worry, it's not the Rona. My Sharona. Wow. I think we will read one story tonight because, wow, this one is long. Yes, one tale for the evening it is. This one is called The Bold Knight, The Apples of Youth, and the Water of Life. Somehow, knowing these Russian fairy tales, I'm pretty certain the apples of youth are actual apples, and the water of life is actually water. And I don't think it's an allergy thing, because it's not like something up there. It's just the skin had an itch right here. And it's gone now, because I've itched it. Either way, shall we get to it? Let's get to the reading, yes. If the levels are all right, let me know. If they're too loud on the music, let me know so that I can make that adjustment. 14, that's the page number. Don't want to lose place, do we? There we go. All right, here we are. The Bold Knight, the Apples of Youth, and the Water of Life. A certain king grew very old, and his eyes began to fail. He heard that beyond the 9th land in the 10th kingdom there was a garden with the apples of youth, and in it a well with the water of life. If an aged man ate one of those apples, he would grow young, and if a blind man's eyes were bathed with that water, he would see. The king had 3 sons, so he sent his eldest forth on horseback to find that garden and bring him the apples and the water, for he wanted to be young again and to see. The prince set out for the distant kingdom. He rode and came to a pillar. Oh, sorry. Got a little chili stuck in my mouth. There we are. Yes, it's not just story time, it's chili time! Late night chili is a wonderful thing. On this pillar 3 roads were marked. If he followed the first, the marker said his horse would be sated and he himself would be hungry. If he followed the second, it said he would lose his own life. If he followed the third, it said his horse would be hungry and he himself sated. He thought and thought, and finally took the road that promised food for himself, and he rode till he saw a very beautiful house in a field. He approached it, looked all around, opened the gates, did not doff his cap nor bow his head, and galloped into the yard. The owner of the house, a widow who was not very old, called to the young man, "Welcome, dear guest." She led him in, seated him at the table, prepared all sorts of viands, and brought him large beakers of heady drinks. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? But something tells me something is going to go wrong. The young man regaled himself and lay down to sleep on the bench. The woman said to him, "If it is not fitting for a knight nor honourable for a gallant man to lie alone, lie with my daughter, the beautiful Dunya." He was quite pleased with this proposal. Dunya said to him, "Lie closer to me so that we will be warmer." He moved toward her and fell through the bed. In the cellar into which he fell, he was compelled to grind raw rye all day long while he could not climb out. Poor sap. Poor sap. In vain the king waited and waited for his eldest son to come back. Finally he gave up waiting. Then he sent his second son to get the apples and the water. The prince took the same road and suffered the same fate as his eldest brother. From long waiting for his sons, the king became very sad. Now the youngest son began to beg his father's permission to go forth to seek the garden, but his father absolutely refused to let him go and said to him, "A curse is on you, little son. Your older brothers perished on this quest, and you, who are still a tender youth, will perish even sooner than they." But the young prince kept imploring his father and promised him that he would bear himself more bravely for the king's sake than any brave knight. His father thought and finally gave the boy his blessing for the journey. On his way to the widow's house, the young man passed the same pillar as his older brothers. He too came to the widow's house, dismounted from his horse, knocked at the gate, and asked whether he could spend the night there. The widow received him kindly, just as she had his brothers. Yes, and invited him in, saying, "Welcome, unexpected guest." She bade him sit down to table and placed all kinds of meats and drinks before him, enough to stuff himself. He ate his fill and asked whether he might lie down on the bench. The woman said to him, "It is not fitting for a knight, nor honourable for a gallant man to lie alone. Lie with my beautiful Dunya." But he answered, "No, little aunt, a visitor must not do that without first making certain preparations. Why don't you heat up a bath for me, and let your daughter lead me to the bathhouse?" So the widow prepared a very, very hot bath, and led him to the bathhouse with the beautiful Dunya. Dunya was just as wicked as her mother. She made him go in first, locked the door to the bath, and stood in the hall. But the bold knight pushed open the door and dragged Dunya with him into the bathhouse. He had 3 rods, one of iron, one of lead, and one of cast iron. Interesting. And with these rods he began to belabor the young girl. She wept and implored him to stop, but he said, "Tell me, wicked Dunya, what have you done with my brothers?" She said that they were in the cellar grinding raw grain. Then only did he let her go. They came back to the main room, tied one ladder to another, and freed his brothers. Oh, Crystal, you know what they're going to do. They're going to yell, "Huzzah!" because you have joined the story. He told them to go home, but they were ashamed to appear before their father, because they had lain down with Dunya and had failed in their mission, so they wandered about in the fields and woods. The night went on. He rode and rode till he came to a farmhouse. He entered. There sat a pretty young girl weaving towels. He said, "God bless you, pretty maiden." And she answered, "Thank you. What are you doing, good knight? Are you running away from an adventure, or are you trying to find one?" "I'm trying to carry out a mission, pretty maiden," said the knight. "I'm going beyond the 9th land to the 10th kingdom, to a certain garden where I hope to find the apples of youth and the water of life for my aged blind father." She said to him, "It will be hard, very hard for you to reach that garden. However, continue on your way. Soon you will come to the house of my second sister. Go in to see her. She knows better than I how to find the garden, and will tell you what to do." Turning down that music just a little bit. So he rode and rode till he came to the house of the second sister. He greeted her just as he had the first, and told her who he was and where he was going. She bade him leave his horse with her, and ride on her own two-winged horse to the house of her older sister, who would tell him what to do, how to reach the garden, and how to get the apples and the water. So he rode and rode till he came to the house of the third sister. She gave him her four-winged horse, and told him, "Be careful, in that garden lives our aunt, a terrible witch. When you come into the garden, do not spare my horse. Spur him strongly so that he clears the wall in one bound, for if he touches the wall, the strings with bells that are tied to it will sing out, the bells will ring, and the witch will awaken, and you won't be able to get away from her. She has a horse with 6 wings. Cut the tendons under his wings so that she cannot overtake you." That's awful for that horse. Why not just kill the witch in her sleep? Killing a witch, I suppose, would be better than cutting the tendons of a horse's wings. Poor horse. He did as she bade him. He flew over the wall on his horse, but his horse lightly touched one string with his tail. All the strings sang and the bells rang, but softly. The witch awoke, but did not clearly distinguish the voice of the strings and the bells, so she yawned and fell asleep again. And the bold knight galloped away with the apples of youth and the water of life. He stopped at the houses of the sisters, where he changed horses, and darted off to his own kingdom on his own horse. Early next morning, the terrible witch discovered that the apples and the water had been stolen from her garden. At once she mounted her 6-winged horse, galloped to the house of her first niece, and asked her, "Has someone passed by here?" The niece answered, "A bold knight went by here, but that was long ago." The witch galloped on farther, and asked her second and third niece the same question, and they gave her the same answer. She rode on and almost overtook the bold knight, but he had reached his own land and no longer feared her. There she dared not enter. She only looked at him, and in a voice hoarse with spite, said, "You are a fine little thief. You have succeeded very well in your mission. You got away from me, but nothing will save you from your own brothers." Having thus foretold his fate, she returned home. Our bold knight went on his way in his own land, and found his vagabond brothers sleeping in a field. He set his horse loose, did not awaken his brothers, but lay down beside them and fell asleep. The brothers awoke, saw that their brother had returned to his own land, softly took the apples of youth out of his breast pocket, and threw him, still sleeping, over a precipice. He fell for 3 days till he reached the dark kingdom where people do everything by firelight. Wow! A 3-day fall! Wherever he went, he found the people sad and weeping. He asked the cause of their sorrow, and was told that their king's only daughter, the beautiful Princess Polyusha, was to be given up the next day to a terrible dragon who would eat her up. In that kingdom, they explained, a maiden was given to the 7-headed dragon every month, and that was the law. And now it was the turn of the king's daughter. When our bold knight heard this, he went straightway to the king and said to him, "King, I will save your daughter from the dragon, but later you must do for me whatever I ask of you." The king was overjoyed, promised to do anything for him, and to give the princess to him in marriage. The next day came. The beautiful Princess Polyusha was led to a 3-walled fortress on the edge of the sea, and the knight went with her. He took with him an iron rod that weighed about 200 pounds. He and the princess waited there for the dragon. They waited, and while they waited, they conversed. He told her about his adventures, and said that he had the water of life with him. Then the bold knight said to the beautiful Princess Polyusha, "Pick the lice out of my head, and should I fall asleep before the dragon comes, waken me with my rod, otherwise you will not arouse me." And he laid his head in her lap. She began to look for lice in his hair. He fell asleep. The dragon flew inshore and circled above the princess. She tried to waken the knight by shaking him, but did not hit him with his rod as he had asked her to do, for she did not wish to hurt him. She could not waken him and began to weep. A tear dropped on his face, and he woke up and exclaimed, "Oh, you have burned me with something pleasant." Meanwhile, the dragon began to swoop down on them. The knight took up his 200-pound rod, swung it, and at one stroke knocked off 5 of the dragon's heads. He swung back a second time and knocked off the remaining 2. Yes, Grey Wolf, there are lots of dragons in these tales. Huzzah! Thank you for joining, by the way. And what's gross? Awakened by the burning tear, or or, knocking the dragons' heads off with a giant iron bar. Either way, he gathered up all the heads, put them under the wall, and cast the monster's trunk into the sea. An envious fellow saw all this, stole lightly around the other side of the wall, cut off the knight's head. What? Cut off the knight's head and cast it into the sea, and bade the beautiful Princess Polyusha tell her father, the king, that he had saved her. What a bastard! And how did the knight fall to this bastard? He swore that if she did not say this, he would strangle her. There was nothing to be done. Polyusha wept and wept as they went to her father, the king. The king came out to meet them. She told him that this fellow had saved her. The king was enormously happy and at once set about preparations for the wedding feast. Guests arrived from foreign lands, kings, tsars, and princes, and all of them drank and amused themselves. The princess alone was sad. She would go into a corner behind the barn and shed burning tears for her bold knight. Oh, the lice part. Yes, that is gross. It's rather gross, yes. Ugh. And I don't know. I mean, are they good dragons or bad dragons? Depends, I suppose. And in regard to the princess here, I sure hope beyond hope, she remembers about those waters of life the knight has. Anyway, it occurred to her to ask her father to send fishermen to catch fish in the sea, and she herself went with them. They cast a net and drew out fish, an enormous quantity. She examined them and said, "No, that is not the fish I want." They cast another net and dragged out the head and trunk of the bold knight. Polyusha rushed to him, found a phial with the water of life in his breast pocket, placed the head on the body, and wet it with the water from the phial, and he came to life. She told him how she loathed the man who wanted to take her. The knight comforted her and told her to go home. Later, he would come himself and set things right. I see Amber has joined us. Huzzah! Yikes, what? The death of the knight, is that it? Perhaps, I don't know. Anyway, so the king came to the royal palace and found all the guests drunk, sporting and dancing. He declared that he could sing songs in various modes. The guests were pleased at this idea and asked him to sing. First he sang for them a gay song full of jests and old saws, and the guests were all charmed and praised him for singing so well. Then he sung a song so sad that all the guests burst into tears. The knight asked the king, "Who saved your daughter?" "Oh yes, who saved your daughter?" The king pointed out the envious fellow. "Well, king," said the knight, "let us go to the fortress with all your guests. If he can find the dragon's head there, I will believe that he saved Princess Polyusha." All of them went to the fortress. The fellow pulled and pulled, but could not pull out even one head. It was far beyond his strength. But the knight pulled them all out as soon as he tried. Then the princess told the whole truth about who saved her. Everyone realized that the bold knight had saved the king's daughter, and the fellow was tied to the tail of a horse and dragged over a field till he died. Good, the bastard! Yes, the knight's death in blackmail. What the fuck? These crazy Russians, right? But I'm glad that the bastard was tied to a horse and dragged until he died. That seems appropriate, right? Right? I should think it's appropriate. Speed. Anyway, moving on. The king wanted to marry the bold knight to his daughter, but the knight said, "No, king, I don't need anything from you. Only take me back to our bright world. I have not yet finished my mission for my father. He is still wanting for me to bring him the water of life, for he is blind." The king did not know how to take the knight up to the bright world, and his daughter did not want to part from him. She wanted to go up with him. She told her father that there was a spoon-billed bird that could take them there, provided she had enough to feed it on the way. So, Polyusha, or Paliusha, had a whole ox killed and took it with her as a store of food for the spoonbill. She and the knight said farewell to the underground king, seated themselves on the bird's back, and set out for God's bright world. When they gave more food to the bird, it flew upward faster. Thus, they used up the whole ox to feed it. Now they were perplexed and afraid lest the bird should drop them down again. So Paliusha cut off a piece of her thigh, whoa, and gave it to the spoonbill. Whoa! That's dedication. The bird straightway brought them up to this world and said, Throughout our journey you fed me well, but never in my life did I taste anything sweeter than that last morsel. Oh, shit! It got a taste for human flesh and it liked it! Oh, no! Paliusha showed the bird her thigh, and the bird moaned and spat out the piece. It was still whole. The knight put it on Paliusha's thigh, wet it with the water of life, and healed the princess. And Amber, if you fall asleep, don't worry. It's late. I understand. You can always come back. And there are plenty more story times in the future for you to comment. Don't worry. They went home. Then they went home. The father, the princess, and the father, the king of the land in our own world, met them and was overjoyed to see them. The knight saw that his father had grown younger from having the apples, but that he was still blind. The knight at once anointed his father's eyes with the water of life. The king began to see. He embraced his son, the bold knight, and the princess from the Dark Kingdom. The knight told how his brothers had taken his apples and thrown him into the nether world. The brothers were so frightened that they jumped into the river, and the knight married the Princess Paliusha and gave a most wonderful feast. I dined and drank meat with them, and their cabbage was toothsome. Yes, toothsome. Even now I would eat some. That's high praise for cabbage, I suppose. Anyway, that's that for that story. And hey, I know I'm awesome, and you almost certainly thank you. Of course I'm an understanding bastard. Come on now, huh? Who do you think I am? Don't you know who I am? Anyway, here we are. The picture, the illustration for tonight's story. There it is. Look like little dudes. Anyway, everyone, that is the end of story time for the evening. Because the next story is also long, so I will save that for next week. In the meantime, thank you again, friends, for being here and for watching. I am so glad you were able to join and to be a part of this. Yeah, lol. Once again, Facebook, find me, Brett Picorni. Also... Yes, but the thing about so let me show that comment. So far, we've had multiple dragon beheadings, knight beheadings, and a thigh cut off. Quite a bloody story. But hey, don't forget the thigh was put back on. So there's that. Oh, and you also left out the part where someone was dragged on a horse to death. There's that too. So, anyway, Brett Picorni on Facebook, find me. Storytime, 2 words, exclamation point at the end. Then, YouTube, Beat Picorni 1 is the channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave comments. I'd be glad to have them and to comment back, and if you leave a comment, you do get a special huzzah shout-out. So there's that. Keep that in mind. Finally, Twitch, Brett Doesn't Game, all one word. Now, I will be starting a new channel soon, and night, I will try my best to sleep well, and I will see you later. Have a good night. I will be starting a new channel fairly soon, but I will continue to do story time on this one. So, more updates to come. In the meantime, tomorrow we resume story time with Bram Stoker's Dracula, and in the meantime, good night. I bid you adieu. Farewell. So long. Have a wonderful evening. I hope you all